खुद्दाम अहमदियत खुद्दाम अहमदियत खुद्दाम अहमदियत खुद्दाम अहमदियत खुद्दाम अहमदियत खुद्दाम अहमदियत खुद्दाम अहमदियत.
We're going to finish off with the K talks, and we have a really a good friend of mine, Umar, Dr. Umar Nasser. Are you on, Dr. Saab?
Yeah, Simon.
Assalamu alaikum.
Look very yellow.
Joining us from Iceland.
Yeah. I'm going to change it.
Umar, how are you? How are you doing today?
Alhamdulillah, I'm doing very well, thanks. How are you?
I was very close to you today in Leamington.
Yeah, sorry.
So thought catch up with you online then.
Yeah.
Okay. Umar Saab, just wanted to bring you on today because you are part of Leamington Spa anyway, and you are part of the Midlands. So it was good for me as well to introduce you to everyone. I'm sure everyone recognizes you or have spoken to you before. But for the sake of those people who haven't, could you just introduce yourself? I know it's not nice talking about yourself. We were talking about, rational religion. But we always like to get to know who's our talker as well. So what's up? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're born, your educational background and everything?
Okay. So my name's Umar. I'm sort of Jamaat-wise at the moment working in National Tabligh Department. Have this platform, Rational Religion, which seeks to tackle atheism and questions on the existence of God, as well as wider social, economic, not political per se, but wider social and cultural things. We try and tackle on the platform. It's a website and a YouTube channel. About myself, otherwise, I'm a doctor. I'm a psychiatry trainee, so I'm hoping to be a psychiatrist when I'm fully trained up. And I'm working in Warwick mainly at the moment in child psychiatry. I was born originally in America, but lived here basically all my life in Hayes Jamaat. I met my Rabbi Sub, it's in Birmingham, wasn't it? Birmingham Masjid. Yeah.
The Dar Barakat, you gave us a little bit background about that. So
I think we were doing Itikaf and you were doing Itikaf and you were one of the Murabbis joining us, or the students at the time.
So you've been you said, I remember that time you were saying you and your brothers used to come there every year. Dar Barakat, do Itikaf.
Yeah.
Actually, why was it? Why didn't you go to bethel, for example, or any other mosque?
So at the time we were in London mainly, so we weren't in Leamington at the time. And Dar Barakat was just much easier to get into. They just administratively you could just kind of slide in. So there was less paperwork, and you could be a bit more lackadaisical. And they had because they have so much space there. I think they're not particularly they don't have like a really set number of people.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had let's say a great time. It was like a party, but it was it was a very good spiritual time. Doing it.
You always had one foot in the Midlands then, since even when you were in London.
Sorry?
You always had one foot in the Midlands, even when you were in London.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Yeah, that's true. That's true. I'd recommend people do it. I mean, obviously, we may not be able to. Well, unlikely we'll do it this year, but next year, inshallah, hopefully things will be back to normal.
Yeah, we are practicing a sort of isolation, anyways.
That's true. That's a force to on everyone. But when you can do the car properly, I'd recommend people do it if they've got the time. It can be difficult to work and annual leave, but it's possible, especially if you're a student though in uni. A lot of the time in the summers you may have off, and last 10 days of Ramadan you go and live in the mosque, and it's just a great time to catch up on namaz and or rather nafil and Quran and tilawat and reading Jamaat books. So it's very worthwhile.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a rough introduction to me. Is there anything else specifically you think I should?
Yeah, before we go into obviously what you do with rational religion, you yourself growing up, did you feel ever close, like activity-wise, to the Jamaat, or did that happen a lot after starting doing Itikaf and starting that part of your life?
Just checking if this is being recorded. It is. So I think I was in a Qiyadat, sort of an outer London, and it was, I think, I found it difficult to relate to in some ways. A lot of the stuff at that time in the 90s was still kind of, you're not supposed to, but was sort of held in Urdu, and my Urdu was bad and remains pretty bad. So I could relate to some things as well, and it was far away. And I just didn't feel that much of a connection to the Jamaat Nizam per se, but obviously my family, was certainly a connection, obviously through the family, and the importance of Khilafat and the Jamaat as a whole was emphasized. But I never really felt like I didn't know that many Khaddam, and to be honest, I lived quite far away. I lived about 45 minutes away from anyone else. And obviously when you're a kid, you can't drive yourself, so you rely on parents. There was one other Khadim who lived literally on my street, Hanif Martisa, but apart from him, I wasn't really near that many people. And we weren't really, engaged with the Jamaat Nizam until really like we're doing a Jalsa duty, and something very cool happened. It's a nice little example of how doing some work for the Jamaat can breed other good things. Is myself and my brothers, we were doing the carpeting duty in the Jalsa Gah, in the main Jalsa Gah.
Yeah.
You have to like staple all the carpets down. It's quite an intense job actually in some ways. So we were doing that, and we happened to be with just a few other Khaddam, and we basically found we all really kind of got on really well, and we're all kind of interested in science or hand scientific backgrounds. And funnily enough, that basically from us meeting there came AMRA, the Research Association, and we just kind of met there as friends, and together then we realized we had these common interests and put a proposal to Zura for forming a research association in the Jamaat. So that was my first experience of finding people that I could relate to more in the Jamaat. And I think that's one of the great beauties of the Jamaat, is that people are very, very diverse, whoever we are. And you may relate to some people slightly more than others, but the Jamaat has such variety and it has different organizations within it, even within Khuddam, that you can get to know people and that you can kind of be on a level with. So yeah, we kind of did that with our nerd society, and and that was kind of how I started getting more involved with the Jamaat. I sort of understood a bit more about Khuddam al-Ahmadiyya and how the Jamaat works through that. As first time I had an office or anything like that. So that's, something I just recommend to others is to just try and get involved, and you'll find your niche. And everyone can serve the Jamaat in some way. Like everyone has talents and everyone has skills, and the Jamaat it's a global Jamaat, and we need to reach out to every kind of person, both within the Jamaat and outside of the Jamaat. So I think individuals need to think about, okay, what are my talents, what are my skills, what are my interests? How can I develop them, and how can I use them for the Jamaat? And you should always try and be on the lookout for that. Obviously, there's some things which are just kind of work for RZ and a bit more kind of manual labory, which has its great value. But just try and your specific interests and talents can be used for the Jamaat, and try and do that if you can.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's such a great example. I didn't mean to expose your past in any way, but I wanted to show people a great example of how it's not too late for anyone to get involved within the Jamaat, and there are so many different avenues, as you said about with Amra. Sorry, you can just it just slowly eases you into the system of the Jamaat in a way, and it just helps people who you would think that they've totally gone, they can come back in some way, shape, or form to help the Jamaat, because everyone has a talent, everyone has a skill, but it's just harnessing that and like I said, easing them into the Jamaat so that they can display what they're made of as well. Yeah. So this is a message to all of us, guys. It's never too late to get involved with the Jamaat, and there are so many different platforms that offer that opportunity. So inshallah, other people as well who are listening to this also get inspired to get involved into working for the Jamaat and have some success, as Umar has had so far in his early life. Talking about the 90s, you sound so old, man. You're our age. But Umar, this would be a good time to introduce rational religion. So could you just tell us a little bit about what it is? I know you mentioned it before, but what can we learn from what you guys do, and how did it even start? Even I don't know, to be honest.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. I think there's something instructive about it. So it started, I don't know, some of you guys may know my brother Tahir. one of my brothers. He's a very passionate guy, let's say, very passionate guy. And he saw this video by Stephen Fry. He's I'm sure you guys, most of you know Stephen Fry. He's quite a big atheist as well and does atheistic videos online. So my brother saw this video that he did on whether you can be happy, how to be happy without God and how to be moral without God. And my brother didn't like it at all. I thought it was rubbish and felt compelled to reply to it. So he downloaded some like video animation software and just taught himself how to do it and then made an animation against him. And we just sent that around in Jamaat and it kind of caught on. At the time, we had quite an aggressive name, End of Atheism. So the website was called endofatheism.com, which stands for End of Atheism. And in his heart, that's still who we are. But we tried to make it more PC after that and call it Rational Religion.
The name Rational Religion, what does that mean?
So, I mean, we changed it to that because, it was a bit aggressive. And really what we were getting at is that you can have you can have religion that's rational. You can have religion that's scientifically acceptable. And that religion doesn't mean having faith without evidence. You can have belief with evidence. So, both, basically saying that the same God who created the universe is the one who made our minds, and our minds should be able to comprehend and understand this universe. And the truth of religion should also be rationally acceptable. So my brother initially kind of, we just started making a few videos on the end of atheism, but we were kind of like a private thing. We weren't doing it under the Jamaat. But we kind of had chats with some people, and in reality, there's no real blessings outside of the Jamaat. You can't really do much, outside of the Nizam, because the Nizam, in order to have blessings, you need to be attached to Khilafat. And Khilafat, the way that it almost manifests itself is through the Nizam. So if you're outside of the Nizam, then in a sense you're outside of Khilafat, or at least under the cover of Khilafat. There are some exceptions, I guess, in some ways, but I think that's the rule. So we had chats with certain people, and the belief department were interested under Ibrahim Ikhlaf Saab to bring us under, and we weren't sure about it because we were like, we're going to lose some of our freedom. We're not going to be able to kind of do slightly more interesting things. But we thought, at the end of the day, it's under Khilafat. It can't go wrong.
Did you feel like you were going a different direction to what the Jamaat wanted at that time? Is that why you felt like you needed to come back to be guided in a certain way?
Not really. It was more just in principle. I think we recognize you can't really, like success doesn't really come outside the Nizam, especially if you're trying to do something in the name of Ahmadiyya and you're outside the Nizam. It's weird. Yeah. So it felt a bit uncomfortable after a while because we were starting to get a little bit more recognition. Then it's like, well, why are we doing this outside the Jamaat? But our fear was that, how are we going to have freedom within the Jamaat to do the things that we want to do? Because, we thought we want to go in certain directions with it. But alhamdulillah, we just basically said, well, we just kind of trusted that things will work out okay. We came under the belief department, and things have gone alhamdulillah very well. So we changed it to Rational Religion to be a bit more PC, a bit more acceptable, but also it's a good name. And alhamdulillah, after 1 or 2 years, we were formally launched by Huzur at Jalsa, which was a very big moment. And it's amazing because surely through the blessings of Huzur, we kind of, our views skyrocketed upwards from 1,000 a month to 50,000 a month kind of thing. So on our webpage. So we kind of really saw, especially just after Huzur launched us, we saw a big tick up in our views. Some of that was just from people Googling it at Jalsa, but then afterwards we just had a big trend upwards. So that was a graphical representation of the blessings of being under the Jamaat, which was nice. It's been a cool journey. We've been interviewing some people outside of Jamaat and trying to get some expert views on things. And what we try and do is just try and be a bit, different in a way, but in a good way. Try and engage with topics people don't always engage with, and provide the intellectual framework that Ahmadiyya operates in. And really, actually, I guess the real thing we're showing is what we're trying to do is show that the world needs Islam. We don't need the world needs Islam. And the world would benefit from Islam. The economic problems would be solved through the Islamic economic system. The social problems people have and your friends have would be solved by following Islamic teachings if they're applied properly. And then ultimately contentment of the heart and your inner peace depends on a relationship with God. But the West doesn't have it can't accept that because the religion that it has been Christianity, and Christianity has been unfortunately so irrational. So they rejected that. So that's the one big religion. And the other big religion is Islam, and they see that they see from various things they think they're all terrorists. So that's the kind of the two things. The two impressions of religions are either extremists or irrational. So what we have to do as a Jamaat is show that we're both rational and not extreme, and actually it's a productive way of living your life, and it's the right way of living your life. And rational religion is just one small manifestation of trying to do that.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's so incredible. I've gone over the work that you guys have done. So many, you made so many videos now. I know it probably takes hours, right, to make just one video, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You've probably learned that the more exciting you want to make your videos, the more editing you guys have to do. Did you know how to do edit before, or did you just jump straight into it and just learn?
No, so we've got, alhamdulillah, it's not just that, like, it's only kind of us, unfortunately, on screen, but there is a team behind us. We've got an editor, Daraza Gonzalez, who also works for NTA. And we've now got one other, and then we've got some people in marketing and for our blog. So it is a wider team. So we're definitely not just doing the work ourselves. But I learned to kind of edit, like, I think it was a school play that I recorded in my final year at school, and then I spent 2 summers editing that, so I kind of roughly knew what to do. So yeah, it's interesting how random skills you pick up in life can be used for the Jamaat. Actually, I found that in a few different ways. So actually, if you're at school, really try and use these opportunities to develop, like even writing, like if you can edit your school magazines or newsletters, whatever it is, it really helps you later.
I think Huzur always says that whatever skills you learn throughout your life, always try to look at those skills and see how you can implement them into the Jamaat, so the Jamaat can also benefit from that as well. Yeah, so that's also a great lesson. That we talk about murabbis and people working in secular life as well. That both should work hand in hand to get the best result. So that on both sides you can advance in the way of Allah as well. I just wanted to show everyone, if you allow me, your website on YouTube. Actually, first YouTube channel. So I was looking, mashallah, firstly just looking at the views. What is the secret, firstly, of how do you target your audience? I know because it's more external, isn't it? You're targeting an audience who question religion, who think about, who are atheists, who aren't atheists.
Yeah.
So how do you firstly decide what video you want to make? And also, how do you target your audience? What's the best way to do that?
I mean, we've always struggled with that question in a way because, who is the Jamaat targeted at? Well, it's all humans, basically. It's kind of everyone. So you kind of want to just make something that's generally interesting. To be honest, what we've done is we've done things that interest us as people, because we figured we're going to be most passionate about things, and we're going to be able to speak the best about things that we genuinely find interesting. And then we just kind of followed that and hope that the audience would come, and alhamdulillah it has. Because the things that, as an Ahmadi generally, the things that you're interested in are a lot of general kind of general interest, things like, can spirituality help depression? That's of general interest. Is mindfulness kind of worth the hype? That's of general interest. We've kind of, I think we appeal a lot to Sunni Muslims, interestingly. We have a fair amount, like our website views are all basically Sunnis, from what we can tell, on science and religion articles. And then a lot of kind of Christians in the West who are interested in like design in nature and whether there's evidence for God in nature. But it's fairly broad. So I don't know how, we probably don't target our audience well enough. Like we probably should find a niche and just hammer it. But the thing is, if you're, as I say, if you have diverse interests, and, Ahmadi should, and Islam gives you some very diverse interests, then you end up kind of trying to talk about lots of different things.
So looking at the videos, Umar, so many interesting ones. I remember in particular the Russell Brand video that you guys reacted to. How do you was this one of the most favorite videos you recorded, or which one did you in particular like that you would recommend to everyone? Of course, they're all amazing.
I don't know if they're all amazing.
You like in particular making?
Yeah, I mean I think that's quite an interesting one for everyone, because he shows kind of how the West itself is kind of moving slightly more towards religion, and it's moving away from the hardcore atheism that was pretty popular like 10, 15 years ago. That's kind of actually dying away. You've got people like Jordan Peterson, who's very sympathetic to religion. In America, it's more like Ben Shapiro again. He's a religious person, like conservative religious person. Russell Brand in the UK, again, very, very spiritual guy, or, talks about spirituality a lot. Whereas 10, 15 years ago, you had like Richard Dawkins and, Christopher Hitchens, these hardcore atheists. And obviously that was, I think, linked to the fact that you had like 9/11 and you had all these wars and terrorism. So a lot of that was like a social reaction against religion, and what they saw was extremism in religion. But now that's kind of died down. The West is kind of coming back to thinking, well, maybe there's something in this. But the problem is they don't have an acceptable face of religion yet, because again, they still see Christianity as being irrational, and they still see Islam as being extreme. So our job is to show how it's not irrational and it's not extreme. And as we do that more and more, inshallah, over the generations, it will be taken up and really understood more. But I think if you're going to watch, I think just browse through and find whatever's interesting. That one is a decent one to start out with.
Yeah, definitely. We did do a reaction video. I remember you were involved in that as well.
Yeah.
With your Malcolm X one, which was quite interesting at the time, of course, with the uprise with the black rights and everything.
Yeah.
So that was a good one. I really like that one. I think a lot of people could relate to it as well, and that probably expanded your audience and your viewership quite a lot, didn't it? Yeah.
It's if you just type in Malcolm X into the search bar, then someone will be able to find it. I don't know, but in general. That one was quite interesting.
Yeah. Could we go to your website now? Mashallah, it's very, very professional. I'm sure you're also behind this as well, and your team as well. But firstly, I wanted to ask you about the cube, or the cubics, as we say. What is the significance behind that?
I don't know.
There's a story behind it, but usually with every logo, there's some sort of background to it.
When we changed to Rational Religion, we were trying to find a logo for ages, and I think a cube just came. Oh no, yeah, we always had a cube, yeah, but we had a more cartoony one initially when we started Rational Religion. We kind of rebranded a bit later, but the idea is roughly it's a Rubik's cube being solved. So religion and these questions are difficult things, and then we're trying to solve them for people. But it also just looks cool. So that's the reason.
It's very simple and trendy as well, which is always something I like as well. Could you just take us through your website as well, just because it's probably first time most people are seeing it as well.
Yeah. So I think probably the most useful thing to note is the topic index. If you just go on topic index, that's right.
Yeah.
At the top. So we're actually updating this. This is probably a few months old now, but we're updating it like in the next few days. So this is a nice way to kind of, if you have any questions on any of these issues, if you just have a look at this, it's in alphabetical order, and then you can just select one of them and like Islam or evolution, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So science and religion, and then it'll come up with our videos and articles on that.
Okay.
So you can use that as a kind of resource if ever you come across any of these questions, suffering, etc. So yeah, that's probably the most useful. As I say, we're gonna update that further. Existence of God, I think the first one's probably the biggest. Probably, yeah.
So it's all a mix of videos and articles.
Yeah.
Which is brilliant, because I know some people prefer watching videos, and others, they like to read the articles as well, get the references that you guys write. Do you make it heavily do you talk straight about Islam, or do you give more logical arguments to begin with?
We're pretty, yeah. It's kind of more rational, but we always make sure we bring in Islam and the Promised Messiah specifically if we can, because actually it's dangerous in a way. You don't want to be making too much sense without actually linking back to the Jamaat and to the Promised Messiah, because then it makes it seem like you're actually the one who's making sense. Whereas in reality, we're not really the ones that make sense. It's Islam and Ahmadiyya that makes sense in the Promised Messiah, and we're kind of just plagiarizing them in some ways. So you don't want to draw people to yourself, and that's a general principle. That's kind of what the Lahoris did, is they kind of took the Promised Messiah's work and they kind of passed it off as their own and tried to seek individual fame. So as a general principle, I think it's important to always make sure you're mentioning Islam and the Promised Messiah. So we try and always kind of bring it back to that. Obviously not in every single video, maybe it's a little bit difficult, but as a channel, and we have these pages. So you're in the refutations area at the moment.
Yeah.
So this is basically on an ex-Ahmadi who had like a website. His name was Reason on Faith is his moniker. And he had like a big, massive article about why he left the Jamaat and all this. So mainly my brother put together this long refutation section. And that's in the top right of the website. If you go to refutations, and you can select whichever one you like. So yeah. So we're trying to also refute ex-Muslims and ex-Ahmadis. That's a work in progress. But this was like 15, 20 articles, I think 15 articles.
Yeah.
Focusing on allegations against the Jamaat, but also more generally against religion. And I think, yeah, exposed him pretty well. Yeah, they've been really quiet, actually, since.
Well, really, that's amazing. That's really
I think so. I haven't noticed it.
Something positive from all that hard work. And lastly, you have a podcast section as well. So
Yeah.
this is something which you obviously upload onto your YouTube channel as well.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that. And so obviously it's on iTunes, Google, and Podbean as well.
Yeah.
So do you always have the podcast with someone else, or is it just you guys as well?
So more and more we're trying to other people. But yeah, it's basically the YouTube show, but in audio format, if you want to listen to it on audio. So it's new. We've only got like 4 or 5 episodes up. But yeah, we try and do with other people. So recently, actually, we had one with a Sunni Muslim on Islamic economics and Islamic finance, which is nice because generally Sunnis don't interact with us that much. But he's actually a really lovely guy, really knowledgeable, and he was talking about how Islamic finance isn't Islamic at all, and what are kind of some of the principles of Islamic economics, and obviously, we make sure that he's not wrong with things according to the Jamaat. But a lot of these things interesting, like Islamic economics and finance, are kind of quite well understood to an extent, even by Sunnis, but they are not implemented at all in the Muslim world because they're still kind of addicted to interest and making lots of money in a way that's not really allowed by Islam. So we've got that coming out soon, inshallah, and a few others.
MashaAllah. It's brilliant. I can't, you can see the blessings of Khilafat just through the work you guys are doing. And this is really why I wanted to bring on Umar, is because, I know that, from where you've come from and how you've recognized the blessing of Khilafat, and, how you guys still, even now, you keep Khilafat so close to your hearts in every work that you do, and you see the blessings through it in your work. And it's a strong message to all of us as well, that everything that we do, never neglect Khilafat within your life. Never think that you can go off and do your own thing without, about the permission or the involvement of Khilafat in some way. I think that if we end on that, that would be the greatest message for all of us as well, and for myself as well. Umar, Jazakumullah for your time. I just wanted to open up to everyone if anyone has any questions. I did get one question before when they heard that you were coming on. One of the questions was, how can we all do tabligh? We are young, we want to get involved in some way, we want to answer people. So what are some ways that we can all get involved in tabligh in this time that we're living in now?
Yeah, I mean, it's I guess it's a little bit more difficult in some ways with the pandemic. So a lot of your normal avenues are gone. So I mean, on a very individual level, just through like Twitter or social media, you can be sharing Jamaat posts, and that is important. Like that kind of has a ripple effect outwards into society, and even into other Ahmadis, because sometimes you're doing tabligh to other Ahmadis, and we call that their bid, but it's still a very important thing. So even through like social media, if you're sharing those kind of things, I think, to be honest, what else specifically can you do for tabligh? I mean, contacting a local tabligh secretary, hopefully they should have some ideas of what they're doing locally. So hopefully that'll be, there'll be people that can direct you in terms of what you're doing. But I think in many ways, the most important thing, especially for people who are younger, well, of every age, but especially when you're young, is to increase your knowledge. You should seek to have read every English book assuming you can't read Urdu, but if you can, all be able to read English, read all the English books that of the Jamaat on the Al Islam website. That's going to be the foundation that you need to do effective tabligh. Actually, no, the Prophet I said, yeah, everyone should read his books at least 3 times. So yeah, I'm gonna stick with that. Say you should. But I mean, if you're kind of struggling to find avenues within at this time, then okay, then just, as I say, just become a bit more inward looking, a bit more internal, and just say, I'm going to use this time to increase my knowledge. Because you can, if you have this much knowledge, then there's a limit on how much tabligh you can kind of do in a way. Whereas if you increase that to here, then actually going forward, you'll be able to do much more effective tabligh. Because if you're only at this level, but you spend all your time doing tabligh, there'll be huge blessings in that. That's still good, but there's still a bit of a limit into how effective you can be. Whereas if you increase your knowledge, then that'll be beneficial. And also the Prophet I said that your love of God is based on your knowledge of God significantly. So it's also going to enhance your ability to relate to God, because you can't love that which you don't know. And if you don't read and you don't understand who God is and what the Prophet has written about him and understand how he's explained the Quran, then you're going to have difficulties really developing your relationship with God. So I would say read. If you can't find avenues for tabligh, you're struggling, just read.
Brilliant. Couple of advice there. Sometimes we forget, going back to basics and teaching ourselves before teaching others. I think that's the key. But sometimes as well, when you do tabligh, there are questions which you don't know, and that kind of inspires you to go back and read as well. So sometimes you need to throw yourself in there as well. Obviously now it's a bit more difficult, but it's good when we see things online, we see allegations coming up, we question ourselves, like, what would I say to this? And then that will also inspire others to search, go on Rational Religion, for example, or any other website to find the answers. We have another question. Umar Khan. Umar, do you want to ask your question, please?
My question is, what's the best way to stay more attached to Allah, and or in other words, awareness to Allah?
I mean, I think the key of spirituality in many ways is salat. So increasing both the quantity and the quality of your salat is very important. And that's a reminder to myself as well, and I think to all of us. But if you're able to just do extra nafil, and even if you just don't do any nafil, but you kind of put an extra emphasis on really paying attention and trying to be, let's say, mindful, let's use the common terminology, mindful of what you're doing in your, thinking about the translation of like sort of Fatiha, and really kind of concentrating on what you're doing your wuzu properly, slowing down, then that, having a few even moments of really sincere prayer or 5 minutes is more effective than, several days of prayer which you're doing concentrating in many ways in terms of developing your actual relationship with God. So I would say, obviously still do all your namazah, but make sure you have concentration in your prayer. That's going to be one of the keys to actually developing that relationship with God. Because if you're kind of talking to someone all the time, but you're looking away, you're not really thinking, you're not really, paying attention to them, then you're not going to develop a relationship with that person. If you're genuinely concentrating, if you're genuinely interacting with them, then that's going to have a huge effect. So I think salat is obviously one huge part of that. And there are other things, obviously, like tilawat, and keeping in touch with Hazur and following what Hazur said in the Friday sermons, and there are so many other things which we have to do and which have their place. But I think, for me, it's more of a personal answer. I don't know if Murabsab, wants to come in on that, but I think salat is a key and nafil, but also the quality of the salat.
No, I totally agree. And it's strange, Umar, because since time immemorial, they're always talking about salat, and it's strange how it can relate to each and every single person, no matter if you're an intellectual or if you're someone who's middle class. Doesn't matter who you are. Salat is always the thing that's going to bring you back to Allah. And have you seen that? Have you tried to go on a spiritual journey? You've been to itikaf and everything, but have you seen that change within you? Seeing yourself getting closer to Allah. Of course, it's an up and down journey through our lives, but when you feel like you're on it, do you feel like you're really making that closeness to Allah and those practical steps that you're making?
I like to think so. I think, definitely you feel it when you're kind of concentrating more. But I think mainly you feel it when you're not doing it properly and you're not concentrating. There's a restlessness inside you. And sometimes it's hard to get out of those slumps. And the Prophet wrote about that as well, that, sometimes people are tried through difficulties in their prayers and concentration. but the point is to just keep going. And there are du'as as well, specifically from society to improve that. But yeah, I think certainly the most gains that I've seen in my spirituality has been when I've concentrated on that, and the most dips have also been when I haven't been concentrating on that.
Yeah.
So everyone has their kind of ups and downs, and that's fine. But I think most people would attest to the fact that if they concentrate on that more, that's the whole thing. It's the whole point of connection. I think the Holy Prophet said that Salat is the mirage of the believer. If I'm remembering the hadith properly, the mirage being the ascension, when the Holy Prophet had that very real vision where he ascended to paradise, or his soul ascended to paradise, and he was seeing different things. That was the mirage. They said that the mirage of the believer is in namaz. So that's the one that we can all do and should concentrate on.
Sorry, if I can just add one more point there. I mean, a lot of people will then also raise their hand up and say that, okay, what's the point of having a creator when you're having everything, or what's the point of praying or worshiping when you're having everything? You're getting a house, you're getting education or whatnot, or you name it. So what would you say to that?
Well, you're not getting God, so that's the whole point of life, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
You have a house and you have a car, but if you're not actually fulfilling the purpose of your life, then you're not going to have contentment. Because if you make something for a certain purpose, it's never going to find perfection unless it fulfills that purpose. So if we have actually genuinely been made by God in order to have a relationship with Him and to enjoy that contact, then you're never going to develop perfection in yourself without that, and you're never going to have true contentment. I mean, there are plenty of extremely depressed and people who have a real sense of restlessness, who have houses and cars and jobs. In fact, the whole the midlife crisis is, you have typically a guy stereotypically who kind of got a wife, got kids, done well in his job, he's now a manager, he's got a great LinkedIn profile. And then he realizes that actually I'm not happy. So he kind of freaks out and, buys a Ferrari or something because he thinks, oh, that's what I need. That's the whole midlife crisis. But it is reflected, and you see that in people of different ages as well, is when people kind of have all the worldly goods, but actually don't have anything further, don't have anything more. Whereas on the other hand, if you look at the Sahaba and you look at, I think people even that you may know yourselves and people in times of society, who don't have any of those things, but are actually still always smiling and always happy. And it's because they've got Allah. So I mean, that's the thing which is necessary. All these other things are going to pass, and your own body is going to ultimately be in the ground. And unfortunately, we're having stark reminders of that with COVID, that life can just go. So what we need to do is prepare our souls for enjoyment in this life and enjoyment in the next life as well. And that's the only thing that's really worth anything.
Does that answer your question, Amir?
Yeah.
Do you feel content now? You had any doubts? Is there any more questions? Zed, do you want to ask a question? Bye.
Yeah, I had a question I want to ask. How you guys, alhamdulillah, have started what you said before, it was not rational religion, there was something else, and then with the assistance of Jamaat, you guys turned it into rational religion. What sort of advice would you give to us as youth doing something similar as well, like going on social media and doing some videos like this and sharing it on social media to externals for them to view and get to learn a bit more about Islam and Ahmadiyyat and general about Islam as well?
I mean, there are two ways of doing it. I think the main way is, as I said, to try and follow what the Nizam is doing. So the big departments and Press Ahmadiyya, etc. If they're already making clips and they've got videos out on there, then try and share those, or even react to those, or whatever it is. Try and share official Jamaat material as much as possible. But obviously, as our individuals, we can also, we have permissions to do the brief ourselves. And in that case, I think the main thing is just be sincere and be real. People will appreciate that if you're kind of indicating where you are and what Islam does for you and your actual genuine thoughts on various religious things, informed by Ahmadiyya, then I think that will be valuable. There's a temptation to kind of be, I don't know, very, not necessarily very personal, and kind of be a bit kind of more formal and say what you think others will like you to say in a way. And I'm not saying say anything stupid, but what I mean is just kind of if you're more sincere about things and you're kind of more personal, and you give your genuine personal take on something, and you write it in a blog post or you do it in a video, then that will develop your skills of expression. That will maybe even develop contacts, which will later become, something even more meaningful. So I think that's the key. I think it's to kind of, be real about, what you think is valuable and how Islam and the Jamaat has been affecting you, and how you think it will be beneficial to the world around you, as well as, of course, sharing the official Jamaat material and reacting to that, and etc. Was that all right?
You're going on a bit there. Yeah, mashallah, yeah, it's good. Because I guess he's asking because, of course, Zaid's our regional Tabligh Nazim here in West Midlands. So, of course, he's asking from that perspective of how he can start making videos as well.
Okay,
keep in line with the Jamaat as well.
So I didn't know that. So we've actually got the National Tabligh Department is doing a conference soon on this kind of thing, how to make content and share on social media, and guidance on how to do that. So I'm sure you'll get an invite for that, inshallah. Otherwise, there is if you want to help more directly with the national efforts, then we have platforms like True Islam or Rational Religion that, or actually even just the Jamaat, the Ahmadiyya Outreach UK, which is making videos that maybe you can ask to kind of be involved with. But
yeah, brilliant. Jazakallah. I think the next question, Jamal Chuktai. So, Qaid Sab.
I just.
Assalamu
alaikum. Assalamu
alaikum. I just had a quick question, especially in regards to your Rational Religion work. I was just wondering, do you find it easier or more difficult to speak to theists rather than atheists when discussing rational religion? And I guess the follow-on question and a sort of route for that question, or why I'm asking, is because especially when you talk to theists, they have a very deep and, they have a personal connection to God. And when you present a rational argument, even to things like, you mentioned the Miraj, when you present arguments against that, they say sort of that why are you limiting God, or God is all powerful? And I was just wondering, what's your opinion on sort of debating or doing tabligh with non-theists and atheists, and also what's your response to that sort of question when people say that you're limiting God? Sorry for the long-winded question, but
no, it's a good question. I think the key thing to remember is that there's no one type of theist, and there's no one type of atheist. There's no one type of Muslim. There's even no one type of Ahmadi. So there's everyone's different, and people should be treated, respectfully and individually, as much as possible. So that's why it's difficult to give a blanket answer about that, because there'll be some atheists who are really receptive and who are really actually who agree with what you're saying and can see the rationality in it. And then we get loads of comments from people who are technically theists, but we've got loads of comments, especially recently, from Muslims being like, "MashaAllah, this is a good channel. Shame it's by Qadiani Ghafirs." Okay, so there's certainly no one type of anyone. In general, I think probably our work has landed best in many respects, with like Western theists, especially like in America, like more conservative types, like even more right-wing types, interestingly, just because they have in America that's kind of politically aligned with more conservatism, but also they have an appreciation of God, and they have an annoyance with what they see as too liberal a culture. So there are some areas where they can kind of get along with Islam. But as I say, it's difficult to say that there's one group that it gets on with especially well. But overall, probably theists, but kind of non-Muslim theists in a way. And then the question is about limiting God. And I think the best answer to that is, well, what I think is the most immediate answer is that, invariably where Allah says that He is mighty in the Quran, He also says He is wise, Al-Aziz al-Hakim or something like that. So God is mighty, and that's what the Prophet Messiah said, and he is all powerful, but he's also wise. So he's not going to do something which contradicts his wisdom, even if he could do it. So, if he has created the next life as a spiritual realm, which is non-physical, then it wouldn't make sense. It would contradict his own laws to bring the Holy Prophet physically up there. And in fact, the Quran contradicts it because it said, that his heart saw it. It doesn't say that his eyes saw it. It says that his heart saw that vision. And it's actually referred to as a vision in the Quran specifically, the Miraj. So, so I think those the main things that I would say is that God is all powerful, but he's also all wise. So he's not going to contradict his other attributes. And then invariably, the Quran itself actually answers all of these things anyway. All of these kind of arguments that why didn't God do it like this? Why couldn't Hazrat Isa ascend to heaven? Well, the Quran says that the Holy Prophet, so God wouldn't even do that for the Holy Prophet, and it says that his soul ascended, and it doesn't say that his body did, and said that his body died. So usually the Quran actually answers all these things without having to get into like too deep philosophy anyway.
Yeah, Jazakallah, thank you for the answer.
I think we'll take one more question. Zaryab, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, it's true, but one of them is a small one. One of them is, you're a psychiatrist, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you ever mention God when you're seeing patients?
They often mention it, and I often diagnose them.
Spiritual diagnosis.
And the second one is, how do you manage your time then with everything? How do you discipline with your time?
I'll answer the first one properly first. It's difficult. I mean, to be fair, so like if you've got a depressed patient or an anxious patient, or leaving aside people who are psychotic, because they'll basically choose whatever is culturally appropriate in their psychosis. If you're in Africa and you're in some tribe, they'll talk about the spirits talking to them. If you're, let's say, a Muslim, they'll talk about God and the angels. If you're an atheist in the West, they'll talk about how MI5 or MI6 is talking to them through a chip in their ear. So in mental health and kind of psychosis, it can seem like they're talking about God, but actually they're just kind of making their experiences of hallucinations make sense in their own belief frameworks, if that makes sense. As for like otherwise, can you talk about God? I mean, it's difficult, but the main thing is you don't want to impose your beliefs on anyone, in general as a Muslim, but especially as a clinician, it's inappropriate to do so. So you want to be careful with that. But sometimes you do feel that the main issue behind someone's depression or anxiety or whatever it is like an existential crisis about what am I supposed to do here in life, and what is my purpose, and is it meaningful? And I think a lot of that is a seed, and then it develops into more full-blown mental health issues. So what we'll do is we'll treat the full-blown mental health issues with medications or therapy or whatever it is, and that should improve it, inshallah. But like, there's only so much you can do if that root is something more existential. But then what are you going to do? I can't exactly say, have you seen my website? It's not going to go down well. So you've got to be a bit careful. And I think the way that we tackle those things are on a wider cultural issue through the Jamaat, actually. So if I want to improve people's mental health, also our Jamaat work is doing that as well. And a lot of people suffering is because they're not following an Islamic, way of life. Like if their parents are alcoholics and their parents having affairs and all these things, it's causing all these like damage for people emotionally and psychologically, which is then manifesting in mental health. So the effect of, what I can do in a consultation room maybe isn't that great in terms of religiously, but what the Jamaat can do on a cultural level would actually have a much greater effect on mental health than I think any psychiatrist would do. If you have stable families and you have an economic system that looks after people, etc., and people have a sense of purpose in their life and they have guidelines of how to live, that's by far the most powerful things you can do for people's mental health. Then have psychiatrists at the end kind of doing what they can to pick up the pieces. But there's only going to be so much you can do in a society that's fundamentally dysfunctional. Second question was, how do you manage your time? Not very well. I could do a lot better. I think, I don't know. I think one of the keys is recognizing how much you can sacrifice in the sense of, or replace. Don't just cut things out, but try and replace them with something more interesting. So if you're, I'm just spitballing here, so it may not come out that brilliantly, but if, for instance, if you recognize that you're watching a lot of Netflix every day, whatever it is, then maybe you want to replace that with something more worthwhile. So maybe you can find some of the old question answer sessions with Khalifa Rabah, for instance, which were really real gems out there. And you can try and watch one of those instead of one of the Netflix shows. Or if you're doing a hobby which is taking up a lot of your time and you're really invested in it, like gaming, then can you replace that with, I don't know, another game that's actually more in and out? So you don't waste 3 hours playing Fortnite or something. Maybe you're, I don't know, playing Call of Duty for 15 minutes, then coming off it. Whatever it is that, kind of trying to move towards greater productivity and developing your habits in a way that's going in the right direction. Don't try to make massive breaks, but if you just have a frame of mind of developing habits that will take you in the right direction, then you'll recognize you actually have a lot of time. I think everyone realistically, well, okay, if you're working like 60 hours a week, then there's only so much you can do. But even then you'll have some time, and whatever time you have, you should try and use it for something productive. And even relaxation can be productive in a way. Even doing something fun can be useful if it's serving the wider purpose, if it's actually genuinely relaxing you and makes you more effective for the other things that you're doing. And then just a few small tips, actually, because I think it is useful. This is going to sound like I'm just plugging, but Brave browser, okay, it's called Brave browser. If you've got an Android phone, then you can actually watch YouTube in the background. So a lot of times if I'm like gymming or something, you can watch, Khalifa Rabah, whatever it is, a question answer session on the background of your phone, or when you're driving. And then also one of the best productivity things I think you can do is listen to audiobooks. I find it actually very difficult to sit down and read a book. You have to have a lot of time for that. And if you've got a hectic lifestyle, it's difficult. But an audiobook, if you're commuting to work or you're, again, working out or doing exercise or just going for a walk, you can get through so much more. So I remember a few years ago, I started reading audiobooks, and I've just got through so many more books than I could ever even think about, like reading. And the Jamaat has good audiobooks as well. So I think that's something. So those are a few small tips.
Okay, thank you.
Jazakallah. Umar Saab, Jazakallah for your time. We have come to the end because we have got namaz in 10 minutes. But I just want to say Jazakallah to you for coming on and shedding some light upon the work that you're doing, and also, your current work that you're doing in your real life, you can say. But we've learned a lot from you today, and we do hope that we can all implement those things that you taught us today in our lives as well. And do try to get involved in different ways, just like you got involved. You've come more into the tabligh side. As we said, there are so many avenues to help you guys ease into the Jamaat and help the Jamaat in any way that you can. So again, Jazakumullah Umar Bhai for all your time, and inshallah we hope to see you more on this on our Khadam night, because you are in the Midlands, and everyone is welcome. So Jazakumullah. And that's the end, guys. Usually we finish on Kahoot, but we did all the Kahoot stuff before.
Can I say one other thing?
Yeah, go for it.
I would say Murabi Saab's dad is basically our mentor for all this rational religion stuff.
I tried keeping him out of this.
But Jazakallah for having me in.
Cool. Guys. Inshallah we'll catch up next week again for more K talks and more fun things that we do on this show. Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum.